The room was buzzing with the kind of energy that only a high-end restaurant on a Friday night could muster. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a soft glow over the polished silverware and crisp white tablecloths. The air was thick, with the scent of expensive wine and gourmet food, and the low hum of conversation was punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. It was the kind of place where the wealthy came to see and be seen, where every detail was meticulously curated to exude luxury. But amidst the opulence, there was one person who didn't quite fit the mold, a young black waitress named Mia, who moved through the room with quiet efficiency, her tray balanced expertly in one hand as she navigated the sea of tables. Mia had been working at La Belle Étoile for just over a year, and in that time, she learned to navigate the delicate dance of serving the city's elite. She knew how to smile politely at the snide remarks, how to nod along with the endless demands, and how to keep her composure when the occasional patron tried to test her patience. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was a man at table 7 who seemed determined to push her to her limits. He was in his mid-50s, with a tailored suit that screamed wealth and a demeanor that reeked of entitlement. His name was Mr. Harrington, and from the moment he walked in, he'd made it clear that he expected to be treated like royalty. It started with small things. A dismissive wave of his hand when she asked if he needed anything, a pointed comment about the temperature of his wine. But as the evening wore on, his behavior grew more audacious. He snapped his fingers to get her attention, spoke over her when she tried to explain the specials, and even made a snide remark about her uniform. Mia kept her cool, as she always did, but she could feel the tension building inside her, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Then, just as she was clearing the plates from his table, Mr. Harrington leaned back in his chair, a sly smile spreading across his face. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I've heard that people like you have a natural talent for singing. Why don't you give us a little performance? I'm sure it would be entertaining." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, Mia was too stunned to respond. She could feel the eyes of the other diners turning toward her, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as she weighed her options. She could refuse, of course, but she knew that would only give Mr. Harrington more ammunition. She could complain to her manager, but that would likely result in a lecture about keeping the customers happy. Or she could do what she'd always done: rise above the situation and prove that she was more than the box he was trying to put her in. Taking a deep breath, she set the plates down on a nearby cart and turned to face him. "If you'd like a performance," she said, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface, "I'd be happy to oblige." The room fell silent as Mia stepped into the center of the dining area, her hands clasped in front of her. For a moment, she closed her eyes, blocking out the sea of expectant faces and focusing on the music that had always been her refuge. And then she began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, a gentle melody that seemed to float on the air like a whisper. But as she continued, it grew stronger, more powerful, until it filled the room with a richness and depth that left everyone breathless. It was a song of resilience, of hope, of unyielding strength in the face of adversity, and it was clear that every note came straight from her heart. Mr. Harrington's smug expression faltered as the weight of her performance settled over the room. The other diners, who had initially been amused by his request, now sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on Mia as if seeing her for the first time. Even the staff, who had witnessed countless acts of arrogance from the restaurant's clientele, were visibly moved. But as the final note faded into the air, the tension in the room was palpable. Mia had proven her talent, but the confrontation was far from over. Mr. Harrington's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to speak. But what he said next would change everything. Mia stood in the center of the dining room, her chest rising and falling as the last note of her song lingered in the air. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint clink of silverware from a table in the far corner. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on her, some filled with awe, others with discomfort, and a few, like Mr. Harrington's, with something darker. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, It seemed like he was searching for the right words to cut through the moment she had just created. But before he could speak, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping broke the tension. It was coming from a woman seated at a nearby table. She was elegant, with silver-streaked hair and a sharp, discerning gaze that seemed to take in everything at once. Her applause was measured, almost thoughtful, as if she were acknowledging not just Mia's voice, but the courage it had taken to stand up to a man like Mr. Harrington. A few others joined in, their claps hesitant at first, but growing stronger as the spell of the moment began to lift. Mia gave a small, polite nod, her face a mask of calm, but inside, her emotions were a whirlwind. She hadn't planned to sing tonight. She hadn't planned to put herself on display like that. But sometimes, life didn't give you a choice. Mr. Harrington, however, wasn't ready to let it go. He leaned forward, his voice cutting through the applause like a knife. "Well, well," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "I suppose even a broken clock is right twice a day. But let's not get carried away. This is still a restaurant, not a talent show." The words were meant to sting, to put Mia back in her place, but they only seemed to amplify the discomfort in the room. The woman who had started the clapping shot him a sharp look, her lips pressed into a thin line. But she didn't say anything. Instead, she turned her attention back to Mia, her expression unreadable. Mia forced a smile, the kind she perfected over years of working in service jobs, and picked up the plates she'd set aside earlier. "If there's nothing else, I'll be back to check on you shortly," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her steps measured and deliberate, refusing to give Mr. Harrington the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. But as soon as she pushed through the swinging doors, her composure cracked. She leaned against the wall, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of sizzling pans, shouted orders, and the occasional burst of laughter. But for Mia, it all faded into the background. She closed her eyes, replaying the moment in her mind. She hadn't sung in public since high school, not since the day her choir teacher had pulled her aside and told her she had a gift. "You could go places with that voice," he'd said, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. But life had other plans. College was expensive, and her family needed her to work. Dreams of music school and recording studios had been replaced by late shifts and double bills. Still, she'd never stopped singing. Not really. It was her escape, her way of holding on to a piece of herself that no one could take away. "Mia?" The voice pulled her back to the present. It was Carlos, one of the line cooks, his apron dusted with flour and his brow furrowed with concern. "You okay? What happened out there?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could say anything, the kitchen doors swung open again, and her manager, Greg, stepped in. His face was pale, and he looked like he'd just swallowed something sour. "Mia," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." He gestured toward his office, a small, cluttered room at the back of the kitchen. She followed him, her stomach churning with dread. Greg wasn't a bad boss, but he was a practical one. He cared about the restaurant's reputation, about keeping the customers happy, especially the ones who spent the most money. And Mr. Harrington was definitely one of those. Greg closed the door behind them and motioned for her to sit. "Look," he began, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I know Harrington can be difficult, but he's a regular, and he brings in a lot of business. I can't afford to lose him." Mia opened her mouth to defend herself, but Greg held up a hand. "I'm not saying what he did was right, but you have to understand, this isn't just about you. It's about the restaurant. We need to keep things running smoothly." Mia clenched her fists in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. "So what are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I should just let him treat me like that?" Greg sighed, his expression torn. "I'm saying pick your battles, Mia. Sometimes, it's better to let things go." Let things go. The words echoed in her mind as she left the office and returned to the dining room. But as she glanced toward table 7, she noticed something strange. The elegant woman who had applauded her earlier was now standing by Mr. Harrington's table, her arms crossed and her expression stern. They were speaking in low voices, but it was clear from the way Mr. Harrington's face was turning red that the conversation wasn't friendly. Mia couldn't hear what they were saying, but she caught a few words: disrespect, out of line, and consequences. Before she could make sense of it, the woman turned and walked toward her, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Up close, she was even more striking, with an air of authority that made Mia straighten instinctively. "Mia, is it?" the woman asked, her voice warm but firm. Mia nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm Evelyn Carter," the woman continued, "and I think we need to talk." She handed Mia a business card, the kind with thick, expensive paper and embossed lettering. "Call me tomorrow. I have a proposition for you." Mia stared at the card, her mind racing. Evelyn Carter. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Before she could ask any questions, Evelyn gave her a small, knowing smile and walked away, leaving Mia standing there with 1,000 thoughts swirling in her head. Who was this woman? What did she want? And why did it feel like her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine? As she tucked the card into her pocket and returned to her duties, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. But for now, all she could do was wait and wonder what tomorrow would bring. The rest of Mia's shift passed in a blur. She moved through her tasks mechanically, refilling glasses, clearing plates, and smiling politely at customers, but her mind was elsewhere. The business card in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through her uniform, a constant reminder of the mysterious Evelyn Carter and the cryptic promise of a proposition. Who was she? What did she want? And why had she intervened? In the confrontation with Mr. Harrington, Mia's thoughts swirled with questions, but there were no answers. Not why ETS. She clocked out and stepped into the cool night air. Mia pulled out the card and studied it under the glow of a street lamp. The embossed letters gleamed faintly. Evelyn Carter, CEO of Carter Media Group. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Carter Media Group. Of course she recognized the name. It was one of the largest media conglomerates in the country, known for its music labels, television networks, and high-profile talent management. Evelyn Carter wasn't just wealthy. She was powerful, the kind of person who could make or break careers with a single phone call. And she wanted to talk to Mia. Mia's hands trembled as she tucked the card back into her pocket and started the walk home. Her neighborhood was a stark contrast to the glittering world of La Belle Étoile, a modest collection of apartment buildings with peeling paint and flickering porch lights. But it was home, and right now, it felt like the only place where she could think clearly. As she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, she replayed the evening in her mind. The way Evelyn had stood up to Mr. Harrington, the way she looked at Mia with something that felt like recognition. It was as if Evelyn had seen something in her that even Mia hadn't fully acknowledged in years. A spark of potential, a glimmer of something more. Inside her apartment, Mia kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind racing. She pulled out her phone and typed Evelyn Carter's name into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. Articles about her rise to power, photos of her at red carpet events, interviews where she spoke about her vision for the future of entertainment. Mia scrolled through the headlines, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. What could someone like Evelyn possibly want with her? Was this some kind of joke? A cruel prank? Or was it the opportunity she'd been waiting for her entire life? The next morning, Mia woke up early, her stomach churning with nerves. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that felt professional but not overly formal, and rehearsed what she would say in her head. By the time she dialed the number on the business card, her palms were slick with sweat. The phone rang twice. Before a crisp, professional voice answered. Evelyn Carter's office. How may I help you? Mia swallowed hard. Hi, my name is Mia Johnson. Miss Carter gave me her card last night and asked me to call her today. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of typing. Ah, yes, Miss Johnson. Miss Carter has been expecting your call. Can you come to her office at noon? Mia's heart skipped a beat. Yes, of course. I'll be there. The receptionist gave her the address and hung up, leaving Mia staring at her phone in disbelief. This was really happening. The Carter Media Group headquarters was a towering glass skyscraper in the heart of the city, its sleek design a testament to the company's success. Mia felt small as she walked through the revolving doors and into the lobby, her footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. The receptionist directed her to the elevators, and before she knew it, she was stepping out onto the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Evelyn's office was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Mia knocked softly, and a voice called out, "Come in." Evelyn was seated behind a massive desk, her silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight as she looked up from her computer. "Mia," she said, her voice warm but businesslike. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Mia sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and waited for Evelyn to speak. "I'll get straight to the point," Evelyn began. "I was at La Belle Étoile last night because I was meeting a client. I didn't expect to witness what happened between you and Mr. Harrington, but I'm glad I did. Your voice, it's extraordinary. And the way you handled yourself in that situation showed a level of grace and strength that's rare." Mia's heart raced as Evelyn continued. "I've been in this business a long time, and I know talent when I see it. I'd like to offer you an opportunity, a chance to work with me, to develop your skills and see where your voice can take you." Mia's mind reeled. This was everything she'd ever dreamed of, but it also felt too good to be true. "Why? Me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. "Because I believe in second chances, Mia, and because I think you have something the world needs to hear." But before Mia could respond, Evelyn's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, her expression darkening. "I'm sorry," she said, standing abruptly. "Something's come up that requires my immediate attention. Take some time to think about my offer, and let's meet again tomorrow to discuss the details." She handed Mia a folder filled with contracts and information, then ushered her out of the office with a promise to be in touch. As Mia stepped back into the elevator, her mind was spinning. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, but something about Evelyn's sudden shift in demeanor left her uneasy. What had that phone call been about? And why did she feel like there was more to this story than Evelyn was letting on? The elevator doors slid open, and Mia stepped into the lobby, her thoughts a tangled mess of hope and doubt. Whatever was coming next, she knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But whether it would be for better or worse, she had no idea.